Look perfectly okay
Good
to me.
afternoon, everybody. Are we all ready to go? Yeah. Welcome to our session this afternoon, By Numbers, Fashion and the Silver Economy. Hello, my name is Jamie Huckbody. I know some of you in the audience. I'm European editor of Harper's Bazaar Australia. This is our latest issue for March 2017. It's a special issue. We're celebrating our 150th anniversary, the oldest international luxury fashion magazine on the newsstands. And I'm also editor-at-large of Summer Winter Home, which at the other end of the spectrum is a menswear magazine and only in its second issue, published in New York. I'd like to put a very big welcome to Tracey Lea, who I had the pleasure of studying alongside, working alongside and
playing alongside
when we were students at Central St Martin's, and we graduated in 1997. We just realised whilst waiting for this to kick in that we're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary of graduation this year.
And we've got old.
We've got old. Some of us have got fatter, but Tracy's still not. Tracey is the fashion director of the Sun on Sunday's fabulous magazine. This is her latest cover, starring Louisa Johnson. How was it to style Louisa?
Well, she's very young, very pretty, very selfie obsessed, couldn't stop looking in the mirror and taking pictures of herself, to the point where we had to kind of like wheel her onto set to get the actual shots that we needed, because the selfie images seemed a bit more important to her than the actual cover shoot. So yeah, interesting.
And the legend, welcome the legend that is Terry Mansfield, CBE. So Terry, can you tell us some of the projects that you're working on right now?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. There are two projects I've been working on. One is the exhibition of Diana at Kensington Palace that opened last week. As perhaps all of you know, it's 20 years since sadly she died. And so we've decided it was appropriate, I'm on the board of Historic Royal Palaces, that we should do an exhibition of her interest in fashion and the support that she has given to British fashion during her lifetime. And this is a 2-year exhibition. It's in 2 parts. The first is a collection that started the exhibition, and then at the turn of the year there will be another collection of her clothes. And we're very fortunate that our sponsor for this was Leonard Lauder of the Estee Lauder Company, and we've had tremendous publicity. And as I'm of a generation of Diana's life, I have to tell you that she could sell magazines and newspapers like no one else.
Thank you very much. So it was back in January, and Caroline was sort of reminding me that she'd roped me into participating in this conference. 3 days in January, and I was thinking, well, what we're going to talk about? I don't really, as a professional, as an industry professional, spend so much time thinking about the silver economy, the older generation. A lot of my attention is spent working out what millennials want. I work with luxury brands within my capacity at Harper's Bazaar, who are constantly asking how can we attract the attention and the consumer loyalty of the millennial generation. Obviously it's a huge concern for print media and digital media, social media, things like that. It's all about the generation millennial. But in 3 days in January, as I opened up my mind and my heart, the answers seemed to flood in. So on the 24th, I was watching the Vetements show as part of the menswear collections in Paris, and Demna Gvasalia had answered the call for a lot more diversity on the catwalk. He literally put everybody on the runway. So there was the bouncer, there was your granny, there was your granddad, who we see there in the picture, the security guard, the policeman. And it was really interesting to see an older generation, a silver consumer, on the runway in such an avant-garde, conceptual catwalk collection. 3 days later in the newsagents, I get struck by The Lady, England's longest running weekly magazine for women in continuous publication since 1885, with its chic retirement special issue, the cover line Rise of the Super Ages, seemed to say a lot more than what Bella and Best were saying tucked in behind it. And I leafed through the pages and there was not one mention of tenor lady panties or a bus pass. So here we have a very directional, modern approach to the ladies' editorial. 2 days later, the Sunday Times Style published a beautiful beauty story featuring 69-year-old Maya Musk in a series of pictures by Jason Hetherington in a story called Older and Bolder. And I thought that this was an incredible editorial and photographic essay on how the silver consumer can look cool and beautiful. And these are not heavily retouched images. Her Instagram account is incredible to follow. Can we click on that link?
So Jay, is she working with lots of beauty brands and things already at the moment? Is she
is. She's
capitalising in on her amazing...
Well, as you can see from her Instagram, she's been a model for 5 decades. She's a qualified dietitian nutritionist. She's got 10 grandchildren. And as you can see from her account there, she's really at the forefront of everything that's happening on the fashion scene. There at the Grammys with James Corden. And if you scroll up a little bit at the international collections, she's hanging out with all the who's who. So she's at the forefront of everything that's chic and fantastic about fashion right now. If we could just go back to the present. So in Euromonitor International Report, Top 10 Global Consumer Trends of 2017, they say there's even a label for this market. It's called midorexia, or the middle-aged and older consumers who act younger than their years. It's a term that highlights the shifting status and expectations of a demographic whose members are living and working longer and prioritising wellness while challenging the typical age-appropriate behaviour of older people. And that's something that acts like a thread throughout this whole presentation. So the question I want to ask is, when did it become cool to be old?
Well, for me, I suppose it's been with the rise of social media. So probably for the last 10 years is that. Obviously Instagram started and it became a platform for people to just express themselves, for a generation of older people to show their style. So they actually had a voice at this point, whereas I think before, once you were past 40, you kind of fell off the edge of the fashion world kind of thing. You know, these people can now join communities of like-minded people. They can swap stories, swap boutiques, swap everything on this social platform. You know, and also at the same time things were happening, like in 2012, there was an American apparel campaign with Jackie O'Shaughnessy, who I think was in her 70s at the time, and it wasn't just for their sportswear ranges, it was for lingerie, and it was quite a shocking thing to see, you know, a 70-year-old woman wearing very see-through clothes on huge billboards in America. You know, but people celebrated it, and it was a really, you know, it was a milestone, I think, in that kind of advertising.
Do you think we can date at 70?
Can you date?
Yes.
Of course you can date.
Because that's what we do. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm probably the oldest person in this room, so therefore I thought I would tell a couple of very short stories about being grown up. A short while ago, I went to Singapore to speak at a conference, and the organisers were kind enough to send a car for me to go to the hotel where the conference took part. And so I got out at the airport, very special airport at Singapore, as some of you may know. And a very smart man there, standing there with my name on the board, and I went up and said, "Hello, I'm Terry Mansfield." And I got in the car and off we went. He said to me, "Have you been to Singapore before?" I said, "Yes, I have, about 5 or 6 times." "When was the first time you came?" I said, "Oh, a very long time ago." I said, "And the airport that you picked me up was a military airfield, and I flew in there when I was doing my military service with a propeller aeroplane." Silence. I think you are older than my father, he said. How old is your father? He told me. I said, oh, I'm a lot older than your father. And off we went into the city. When we got to the hotel, he came and he said, may I shake you by the hand? I said, that would be a privilege. You are the oldest man who has ever been in my car, he said. If that is the case, I'd like a certificate. No certificate, only handshake. Second story. I was asked to speak at a school not so long ago about what it was like growing up during the Second World War, which of course I did. And the teacher didn't realize how funny the introduction was. She said, children, you are incredibly lucky to have Mr. Mansfield here to speak to you about the Second World War. And the reason why you're so lucky is that the majority of people that were growing up during the Second World War are dead. Well, that started the introduction, and I hoped I was going to make it to lunchtime. Of course, the teacher set up in the children's minds the appropriate questions after I did my little presentation. A little girl put her hand up and said, Mr. Mansfield, when are you going to die? And of course I said, I don't know. Nobody knows. It's one of the great secrets of the life. Another child said, do you think it hurts when you die? I said, I haven't come here to talk about dying. I've come here to talk about living. Last week, I had lunch with an investment banker from Canada. And he told me this wonderful story about his mother and father. His mother is 73, his father is 80. And 3 years ago, they suddenly announced to the family that they were going to Africa to form a school in Letitu. And so the children were horrified. They said, look, Mother, you're 73. And Father, you're 80. What are you doing? They said, we're going to start a school. So he said it was a role reversal. We're standing on the airport saying goodbye to the mother and father who went off to Africa. And my friend went just 2 weeks ago to see them. And that school now has 1,000 students. Isn't that amazing? And that is what is happening to grow what I call grown-up people. We're very fortunate indeed in that medication and technology has made it possible for us to live a much longer time than previous generations. And you, all of you, will live at least 7 years longer than I probably will live. So I think you've got to pace yourselves, because you'll be working when you're 107 or thereabouts, and hopefully you will be in the creative industries because they will need you.
Or maybe you could model for Harvey Nichols, because they've just used a 100-year-old model in one of their campaigns.
Thank you, Tony, for proving that you're very much alive, not dead. Of course, this conversation is all going on, or started to go on, against a backdrop of advertising media, which seeps into our subconscious. We had Dame Helen Mirren at 71 for L'Oreal's Paris Age Perfect campaign. There was Joni Mitchell, a personal heroine of mine, at 73 for Saint Laurent's Spring 15 campaign shot by Hedi Slimane. There was Joan Didion at 82 for Celine. And most recently, Vanessa Redgrave at 79 for Gucci, shot just not far from here at Chatsworth House by Glenn Luchford. So my next question is then, are talent, integrity and intelligence the keys to making Silver Chic cool? Because if I just whiz back through Vanessa, through Joan, Joni and Helen, those are all women who are very talented at what they do, very respected at what they do. You know, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think using older models in ad campaigns is absolutely brilliant because they bring obviously a wealth of experience to a shoot. They give a reader an interesting narrative to what they've, you know, what have they done with their lives, who have they dated, you know, how many children have they got, where do they live, who have they loved, you know, who was the one that got away. When you look at these women, they've got stories to tell, and I think that's really important in advertising and editorial.
Do you think this is a reaction against the sort of the Kim Kardashians, whose story perhaps is wearing thin, that their stories are full of much more wisdom and are richer therefore for that?
There was a furrier in the days of when people wore fur coats that told me, and I was very young at the time, that he had never sold a sable coat to a lady of 25 where she was paying for it herself. The whole point is that the aging process, and I'm very interested to see you've got a lot of very talented women, but what about the talented men? And perhaps you would like to suggest who you consider is cool. Do you think Mick Jagger is cool? Anyone think Mick Jagger's cool? Can you name a man that is more than 70 that you admire? Pardon? Any more?
It's very interesting that you should bring up the subject of men, because putting this presentation together, it was very hard to find good examples of mature men in great fashion editorial, fashion advertising and
Ralph
role
Lauren?
models. Well, not really. The images are not as exciting as the ones that we're currently seeing on the women's wear. So it was something that I was really aware of, and I think there's room for improvement there from the fashion industry to really sort of reinvent the image of the mature
I think as well, we've always kind of accepted that it's fine for men to get older, whereas it's not.
Yeah.
It's not fine in society for women to get older and to have very sort of close-up images of women's faces in beauty campaigns. You know, it's.
Well, men look better when they're craggy, whereas a woman's face probably would be more subject to retouch, as these images are by John Paul Pietrus.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, basically in this country, I think what we've always done is kind of like looked at age as a weakness. Whereas if you look to sort of the Asian countries, they've always kind of thought of age as something to be celebrated, and actually, you know, the young people, you know, can learn from these older generations, whereas we kind of tend to sort of push the older generation away into a corner. And I think social media has changed that, and because of that voice now that this older generation has got, things are definitely starting to change, especially in the fashion industry, which is notoriously youth and beauty obsessed.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
I've always found it very interesting in Asia. To go to Singapore or Hong Kong or China and see the ages of the people, and you think they're 12 and they're 48. They live very long, they have different diet, they drink tea, they don't drink a lot of alcohol, although Japanese men drink quite a lot of alcohol. They're not very good at it, but they drink it. I remember being in Tokyo on one occasion, and there's a big advertising agency called Dentsu, and we went to a bar, and they're great whiskey drinkers, and after 2 or 3 whiskeys, this Japanese man said, "I tell you a Japanese secret." "What is your Japanese secret?" I said. "We think you all look alike." I said, "We've always thought you look alike. We can't tell one from another." "Ah, you keep face because I say it first." He couldn't believe that we have problems. And there is this localized situation of people seeing things from their point of view. But this whole interesting area, I think, makes it very exciting for people like you, because I haven't come here to talk about me. I've come here to talk about you, because you are the future. You are the people who are going to take the fashion industry in whatever shape forward. And that's why I was very keen to come here, because you are the future. And so what is the future going to be for you? No one knows that. So you're all going to be navigating without a map. But one thing you must always look at is the width of the market. There isn't one segment of the market. There are many facets of the fashion industry. And the other thing to remember is that grown-up people like me happen to have quite a lot of money. Because when I bought my first house, I paid £6,000 for it. And I thought, and my wife Helen thought, we were paying a lot of money. I signed mortgage forms for people who work with me who are buying their first house for $300,000, and it's a terrace house. I think that that has affected furniture and furnishings and the way we live by the amount of money we spend on our property. But the one thing is sure is where you are going is the most exciting thing I want to convey to you today. Because there is one thing you have to bear in mind. If you are creative, you have to do it. You cannot not do it. And I'm assuming all of you are creative, otherwise you would not be here. So you are going to get up to as much mischief every day of your lives in future, because you are going to be very interesting in your journey. And none of us know that journey. I remember when I was in America in '69, long time ago, and an American said to me, "It doesn't matter, Terry Mansfield, where you come from in life, it is where you are going." I had never heard that before. And it was certainly not being said in UK or Europe at that time. And I found that the most empowering thing I'd ever heard. And from that moment on, I decided I would get up to as much mischief as I possibly could. And I have been doing that for the last 60 odd years. So all I would say to you is, you are the future, and enjoy the time, because it is so diverse. You have technology and creativity running in harmony. I use the word harmony loosely, but we need creativity, we need technology, and we need people who can sniff the air and act accordingly. And that's what you are.
Thank you. Another mischief maker besides Terry is Iris Apfel, who I'm sure many of you know. Interior designer and fashion icon, who at 95 is the ultimate fashion muse that every designer and stylist wants to work with. Can we just click on the YouTube link? For those of you who haven't seen Iris in motion, this is a little trailer to her doco a few years ago.
I didn't give a damn about going to the party or being at the party. It was getting dressed for the party. And there's truth and poetry in that.
The rare bird herself, over 75 years of influence in fashion, interior design, the icon Iris Apfel.
That's so nice to hear. Makes a girl feel like there's still a chance. I don't have any rules because I would only be breaking them, so it's a waste of time.
Iris is an artist. What she uses all of her clothing and her accessories to do is compose a new vision.
She looks very voguey.
She has the most remarkable collection of couture costume jewelry in the United States.
I like to improvise, do so on playing jazz. I was probably the first woman to wear jeans. Sounds crazy. It was.
I could feel the pulse of her excitement about living.
Mrs. Loman, the original, said, "You're not pretty, and you'll never be pretty, but it doesn't matter. You have something much better. You have style." I get more kick out of this. It cost $4 and change, and if my husband took me to Harry Winston.
It's not a dull marriage, I can tell you that.
Their fabric company had done a lot of work for administrations in the White House.
We're not supposed to talk about the White House. They get very upset.
Well, we had a problem with Jackie.
Stop. Everything I have, I go out and find.
How often do you need the fix?
Oh, I'd like to have it more often than I get.
I've never heard you say, I don't like the way that person dresses.
I can't judge. It's better to be happy than well-dressed. In the words of my grandpa, a woman is as old as she looks, but a man is never old until he stops looking.
You know why I think you did this film? Because he's very handsome, and I think you really had a crush on him.
Everybody does.
I know.
It's like a magnet. My God.
What's not to love?
I think that what is so interesting, I've worked for an American corporation for 47 years. There is much more tolerance in America in this whole thing of age. You know, my boss, who is the chairman of the Hearst Corporation, is 86. So in my situation, I'm a whiz kid in New York and an old sod here. And we are very ageist on this side of the Atlantic, much more than we realize. You can see it in the politics in America, you can see it in who runs the businesses, the investment bankers, they're all very grown-up people. Do you find that to be the case?
Say that again, sorry.
Do you find that to be the case, that in America people are more senior in age, even in the media business?
No, because if you look what's happening in Europe, I mean, you've got Giorgio Armani, who is 82, you've got Karl Lagerfeld, who's
Sure.
83, Anna Wintour's still in her 60s, so, you know, she's not retired yet, she's not considered old. But I think the opinion makers in Europe are mature as they are in America. Perhaps more so.
Perhaps in fashion, I would give
Yeah.
you that.
Yeah.
In politics, not.
Maybe not so.
Yeah.
With Iris, of course, was Ari Seth Cohen, whose blog and book, Advanced Style, really put the silver consumer out there in all of its glory. That's Ari Seth Cohen there, and his blog, Advanced Style, was really pushed and promoted not by the older generation, but by the millennial generation, who were fascinated by these eccentric older people and their vast wardrobes, walk-in wardrobes of fantastic clothes and jewellery. And it's something that even Tracey's covered at The Sun on Sunday.
Even on
in the Fabulous
tabloids,
magazine.
even on tabloids. Yeah, I mean, you know, I just became a bit obsessed with silver chic. Is that working? With silver chic because of Instagram, really, because I started following Advanced Style, and I just got a bit obsessed with it, and then realised there was a lot more going on to it than this. So it was something we did a couple of years back for our fashion issue. And we had sort of, you know, a really good response on it on Twitter. You know, people were just happy to see these images of older people being used to sell fashion clothes and fashion campaigns, and to be used in editorial because they can relate to them.
And does that fit in with your demographic as a publication?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a huge readership from you know, everyone kind of reads our paper, so from the teenager to the nan will read our newspaper. So we quite often sort of dot in age-relevant kind of editorial pieces as well.
Cool, thank you. And this is something that you've covered on in your fashion shoots as well. We can see a multi-generational shoot there that you did.
Yeah, so this is 10 years old, so it looks really dated. It is really dated, but it was just showing that we could take all different styles. So this one was kind of monochromatic sort of style, but we could take pop colours, we could do, you know, metallics, and all ages can wear these trends, really.
I also think it's incredibly helpful to all of you when getting a job in the future, when you go and see a company, that you can convey to whoever you're seeing that you understand the fashion industry in the widest sense. You understand what it takes to design for children's wear, and obviously women's wear and men's wear, but also the full spectrum of what we've been discussing. If you understand what sells for creative people and also for grown-up people and the whole of today's universe, as an employer, I'd be much more interested in you than if you were very focused in one segment of the market. So you have to show your understanding and your creativity.
And obviously the multi-generational approach that we're seeing in fashion right now, I mean the Dolce & Gabbana ads come to mind, has been seen on the streets, you know, activated by protests against Trump. And I think this image, I can't believe I still have to protest this fucking shit, says it all really. You know, there's almost an exhaustion in the way that she's put that banner together. And that has affected the runways that we've seen in the past few weeks. We can see on the right-hand side, this is the Missoni finale, where the matriarch, Rosita Missoni, is there with her daughter Angela, all wearing the pink pussy power hats. I mean, this is a multi-generational movement that is becoming political, it's social, and it's in fashion. Comme des Garçons Ray Kawakubo at 74, the only other living designer, Yves Saint Laurent was the first in 1983, to be honoured with a solo exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum's Costume Institute. The Art of the In-Between opens on the 2nd of May, another political fashion figure in her 70s. You can see 2 days ago she presented her Autumn-Winter 17 collection in Paris. And I think this is a real tour de force of everything that she's been working towards for the past 40 years. Her comment on the female body, the female silhouette, pushed to maximum extremes. And I think it takes people like Rosita Missoni, like Ray Kawakubo, to show that the older generation are more radical. Terry, is this something that you've identified with, that an older generation is more radical in terms of design and politics than a millennial generation or a younger generation?
I think the truth is that those of us who've had some success like doing it. And so I couldn't imagine not working. And regardless of age, I noticed that there's a questionnaire in the program tonight. And I looked at it, where does old age start? And I've written, I think, 99 on the one I received. I see that so long as your health works out and you're lucky enough to be reasonably fit, I see no reason whatsoever to carry on. What I don't agree with is what I call age blocking, meaning that you stop tomorrow's generation coming through. But there are lots of possibilities where older people can give advice and counsel and participate in young people's lives, which is exactly what I do. I suppose there isn't a year that's gone by where I've had less than 8 to 10 young people that I mentor. I don't know how they come into my life, but they do, and it's a real privilege. And giving back is one of the greatest treats that an older person can contribute. I think basically there are 3 stages of life for me. Learning, I think I was about okay on that. Earning, I've been a lot better. And returning, giving back. You must return because firstly you get surprises, secondly you stay current. It's just as important for me to know what you feel and think as I pass on to you. The exchange, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
That the more we can give time to tomorrow's generation, because you're the future. And just one moment talking about your future, is how in September or thereabouts, when you go into the market for a job, are you going to position yourself as a brand? Please do not send people like me boring CVs. I beg you. I know there is a trend of standardized CVs, a lot of people feel are important. I think they're crap. If I'm looking for somebody who's really creative, I want to see that creativity come through. So you could send your CV on a t-shirt, couldn't you? If you want to be in the magazine business, why don't you turn yourself into a magazine or a newspaper or a television program or whatever it is that you think it will take? Let me tell you some of the people that I've given jobs to in my career who have done the most extraordinary things. They've tied themselves to the front of our building with a yellow sticky on their head saying, "Give us a go." We've had people that have written on my car. If you're going to do that, please don't do it on the screen so I can not drive. There's a whole range of permutations. The permutations are in the limitation of your own head and experience. But please, please don't send lousy CVs. You deserve more.
You have been warned. To put it in the words of Roland Murray, when you're a hooker for hire, you've got to go where the dollars are. Roland never shies from a sexual analogy, metaphor. Here we've got some pictures of an old porn star called Aidan Shaw, who's reinvented himself as a 60-year-old man as a model, very much in demand.
And he's making a killing, isn't he?
He's making a killing. His Instagram account is very interesting. Obviously, we're talking about this on a political level, on a social level, but there's money behind it too. According to Saga, the silver consumer business is worth £320 billion plus. While millennials have become a hot retail topic, fashion brands are keen to focus on the 50-plus age group, which accounts for a quarter of the world's population. I've read a statistic that by 2050, it will be 2 billion people in total. Consumer spending among the over 50s accounts for more than 48% of all UK household spending. So obviously, if you are a fashion communicator, you have to communicate and promote brands to appeal to that market group. And if you're a maker, you certainly want to be making things that appeal to that market group.
I think L'Oreal said as well that 50% of their beauty sales are to the over 50s, so 50%, which I think is huge.
It's a huge number, and it's like by 2020, 1 in 3 consumers will be Muslim. And that's why the modesty trend is such big business right now.
Yeah, I mean, Debenhams have just launched their own range of modesty clothing. It's on the high street already.
ATK, a consultancy in Adweek, put out some statistics that 60-plus consumers make up for the fastest growing group of consumers in the world. There's the statistic, 2052 billion. In the US, the baby boomer generation controls more than 80% of all financial assets. It's not Donald Trump, it's the baby boomers, and accounts for 60% of all consumer spending. Worldwide, 50-plus consumers spent more than $8 trillion in 2010. In 2020, that is projected to rise to 15 trillion. So there's big business behind this. There is a reason why the silver consumer, the older model, is getting their airplay. And this category of consumer needs a face. So I'd like to introduce you to Pamela Lucas, who is a model. She's featuring throughout this lecture in a shoot done by John Paul Pietrus, who has kindly let us use his images, and the shoot was called Of a Certain Age. Here is Pamela looking seductive in her stately home. And she says, so many people tell me that they love what I'm doing and that I'm showing that women over a certain age don't have to hide. More importantly, perhaps, it means people of a certain age are becoming less invisible in this predominantly youth-obsessed world. And it strikes me that in the Pamela story, she looks very strong, she looks very powerful, very beautiful, but there is a sexual energy, there is a sensuality. There is a woman who is not in denial here to these images. And so is it our ideas about what is age appropriate? And I'm thinking about sex and the way that fashion appropriates sex and uses sex to sell, that is the problem here.
I think the media is often to blame for the preconception that women are past a sell-by date at a certain age. And I think now, you know, we're transcending that. We want choice now. People don't feel like they need to become invisible after 50 because they just realise that there's a load of other 50-year-olds out there that are still shopping, still having sex, still eating out in restaurants, living life, you know, to the absolute full.
Some while ago, I was asked by Estee Lauder if I would work behind their counters. And Leonard Lauder said, well, we'd like you to do it, but we need to train you first. So I was in New York and I was trained, and then I went to Bloomingdale's for a week, and I came back and I worked at Selfridges for a week, and then I wrote about it. And I have to tell you that when you have a white coat on, you look not so dissimilar than perhaps a doctor. And the way in which people talk to you is wonderful. And they tell you the most extraordinary things, and I loved every moment of it. And the point I'm making is that when you're working behind a counter in a store like Bloomingdale's or Selfridges, the range of people that you encounter is so wide, not only in age, but in ethnic background. And I remember in Selfridges, there was a lot of humour from the women in Selfridges, much more serious in Bloomingdale's than in Selfridges. A lady said to me, I was talking to her about makeup. I'd been trained, so I knew a little bit. And so she said, I'm married to a man who is 80, she said. I said, I'm sure you look after her. I look after him very well. So she said, yes, you know, he's full of sex appeal. I said, I'm very pleased to hear that. She said, yes, no sex and lots of pills. A woman wouldn't have said that in Bloomingdale's. It's very interesting, the differences. But the key to selling beauty products is trust. And if a woman trusts you, there's a chance that you will sell to her. And remember, beauty follows fashion. Fashion doesn't follow beauty.
Thank you.
Is that right?
Yeah.
To bring in Susan Sontag, she had a wonderful quote saying, much of modern art is devoted to lowering the threshold of what is terrible by getting us used to what formerly we could not bear to see or hear because it was too shocking, painful or embarrassing. Art changes morals. But if we switch up some of the words art to fashion communication, it reads much of modern fashion communication is devoted to lowering the threshold of what is terrible by getting us used to what formerly we could not bear to see or hear because it was too shocking, painful or embarrassing. Fashion communication changes morals. And I want to introduce you, I've already introduced some of the students that I've taught at Manchester, to Genesis P. Orridge, who's a musician, poet, performance artist, occultist and fashion icon. Is there anybody here who does know who?
I don't. You've literally just introduced me to him outside.
So Genesis P. Orridge was born in our city of culture, which is Hull right now for the next 4 years. I don't know how Hull's going to string that out for 4 years, but anyway, for 4 years he was born in Hull, and he was behind a band called Throbbing Gristle, which is just like makes your ears bleed when you listen to it. I don't recommend it. And he got married to a female partner called Lady Jane Breyer, and they wanted to remove all gender from their being, and so they had surgery so that she looked like him and he looked like her. There's fabulous images of them bandaged up.
Have you got a picture of them together?
I've got them today, but you can Google it. Bandaged up in a limousine, looking very Jackie and Joe. And of course, the weird thing is that they didn't look similar at all. But they removed their gender, so there was no hims, there was no hers, there was no his and she's. And they were just one person. They were sort of two halves to one person. And Genesis P. Orridge is at the forefront of a radical conversation about gender, transgender right now, and the way that fashion is collaborating with him and colluding with him is really lowering the threshold of what is deemed acceptable. So Marc Jacobs, a provocateur extraordinaire, has used Genesis Peerage in a recent advertising campaign. And here we see him in a Dazed and Confused magazine. Genesis is in his 60s, and he's really pushing the boundaries. And I admit, every time I see that image, I am vaguely uncomfortable, and I know that
I was a little bit when
you were.
when I
So
saw
what
it,
is it that makes you
but I
uncomfortable?
don't. Do you know what? I don't know. I don't know. It's a little bit awkward. He looks a bit uncomfortable, I think. But
Terry?
I think it's an excuse for being extreme.
the shock value of it.
And that's the way in which he knows he or she can communicate. I'd be interested to know whether they had those sex changes on the National Health Service or whether it was self-funding.
I think they went abroad.
But I do think what is interesting is the recent Burberry event. The Burberry idea of getting fashion and art together with Henry Moore, celebrating 40 years and Burberry with that happening. I think it was a really clever and special event. It's in the same league as the V&A exhibition. I thought it was fantastic, and it just shows that new ideas and new thinking can come through and be very strong.
And to follow up with that, I mean, obviously David Hockney is having a retrospective at the Tate Modern right now. I see him almost as a fashion person because he offers so much to our industry that we can take and reference, and I know that Christopher Bailey at Burberry is a huge fan of Hockney's work and has referenced him frequently. But when I think of Hockney, there's a lot of conversation about the older generation, the silver consumer, being very uncomfortable with technology. And Hockney jumps onto every technology, whether it be Polaroid cameras in the 70s and 80s, and right now he's the man, I think he's in his 80s, or is he pushing on for 90, that has mastered the art of iPad drawing, which other artists who are practicing artists have told me it is incredibly difficult to do that, and yet his iPad drawings are as convincing as his works of oil on canvas.
So whatever your age, you're staying on top of your game, basically. So
age
age does not matter.
ideas.
Being on top of your game is what matters.
I showed the previous images of Genesis Peerage, a silver consumer pushing the boundaries, to a lady I'm going to introduce you to now, and she said, and then common sense kicks in. And that lady is a plain-speaking Barnsley woman called Rita Britton, retailer, designer, and punk. And some of you might have been over to her store, Pollyanna, when she championed Comme des Garçons, Yohji Yamamoto, and de Burgermeister, and she brought the Japanese invasion and the Belgian deconstructionists to the north, well before we had Harvey Nichols and Selfridges, and she really paved the way and educated the northern consumer as to avant-garde design and fashion. And she says, I'm designing garments and exquisite fabrics that somebody is going to love wearing for years and years, just like I do. The kind of woman I'm designing for is one who understands and wants investment dressing. Personally, I don't want to spend £50 on a dress that I'm only going to wear once. That becomes an expensive dress. And the reason why I mention that is because there seems to be a desire amongst the silver consumer, as well as those that are pushing the boundaries and being provocateurs. There is the silver consumer who wants what she calls common sense luxury. And that might be from labels like Paul Smith, Bottega Veneta, who else am I thinking of here? Cerruti.
Or Amazon in the future. You know, it's very interesting to me how Amazon has decided to be very strong in the fashion business, not only with branded merchandise, but this whole new concept that they will be the brand, and so they will create the fashion. They've got now a studio in Covent Garden where they will be doing the shooting, and it's going to be a very big venture. They've taken people from Marks and Spencer and other major retailers, and so who knows where it's all going. But it means to say for you as young people, all these things are opportunities for your future too.
So if we are living longer, what effect will an ageing population have on design? One of Rita's main concerns right now, she's a huge fan of an asymmetric, egg-shaped, ovoid com skirt. But how can she make those skirts for her wheelchair consumers? The fact is, her consumer has grown old with her, and some of them are in wheelchairs. We saw FTL Moda's Autumn Winter 15 show in New York, that this is Amy Mullins. Some of you might know Amy from her debut as a model at the McQueen show, where he sent her down the catwalk in a pair of specially carved, beautiful wooden legs. And here she is in the wheelchair, showing that you can have a disability and take part in the fashion conversation. Maura Horton of Magna Ready, a shirting company whose mantra is getting dressed shouldn't be stressful, living with a disability is hard enough. Her magnet fastening shirts have been made more popular by actor Michael J. Fox's patronage, and these are really sought after by Parkinson's disease sufferers. If we're living older, living with diseases, living with disabilities, fashion design and how fashion communication promotes that design will have to respond.
Well, I think Prince Harry has done so much for acknowledging, with Help the Heroes and with all the other things of disability, the Olympics, all of these things add to what you're saying now.
The reverse of that question is, what effect is all this having on the younger generation of consumers? We see that there is a huge demand for young girls to have grey hair, just like Granny. And I know that your daughter, how old is Frankie?
She's 13, and I sort of decided to go grey about a year ago, and it's nearly there now, but it's nearly grown out. But she was horrified when I said, I'm going to go grey. She said, Mommy, you're going to look so old with grey hair. And now that I've actually done it, she likes it, and I've showed her some images like this. Sorry, I've showed her some images like this on the screen, and suddenly she gets that, you know, you can be old and have grey hair, and wear shiny leather trousers and be a little bit cool sometimes.
Yeah, and you can also be 13 and have grey hair.
Yeah, exactly.
Well.
Or you can be lucky and not have grey hair.
And this morning, looking at my feed on the Paris Ready to Wear shows, it was really interesting to see that Phoebe Philo, somebody who Tracey and I went to college with, and still can't believe she's designing for Celine with her fake tan. She has deliberately put younger models into what looks like mature fashion. You can see the flat shoe, the easy pantsuit, the trench coat Ray Mac, and that silk scarf, almost like what the Queen wears when she goes horse riding at Windsor Great Park. And then we have Vivienne looking incredible. I think she modelled the first look of her own catwalk show.
She looks amazing.
She looks amazing, doesn't she? But what's really interesting is that included in her show, talking about diversity, and obviously this is to do with modesty and racial diversity, and transgender issues, is we've got the young boy dressed in Granny's tweed suit with the little hat and the little Granny's little lapdog as an accessory. So that's how it's working on the reverse. But I think the way I want to finish this is this conversation is to say that the fashion and the silver consumer is ultimately right now about diversity. And as we've seen so much action on the runway and on the streets of London, Manchester, Sheffield, New York, in retaliation against Trump's policies, that this is a really wonderful opportunity for fashion to embrace an old generation. And thank you very much for listening.